Hello, it's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Welcome to this Catholic Business Wisdom series. Today's topic, the not-for-profit organization. My comments today are really going to be somewhat repetitive in the sense that the not-for-profit organization, as structured in the Western economies, for example, in the United States, you'll be familiar with the sections of legislation called the 501c3 corporation or the 501c4 corporation. In Canada and the Commonwealth countries, you'll hear them referred to as under the Business Corporations Act or the Not-for-Profit Business Corporations Act or the Societies Act. But the general point is that, and this is the repetitive point, the not-for-profit organization is a corporate structure like any other in many ways. You still have an organization that is a legal entity. It has certain protections under the law, certain requirements, of course, and it has certain authority, you might say. And these authorities give it the right to do business, to receive donations if it has the IRS or CRA tax donation status, which allows it to receive funds. It allows a not-for-profit organization to conduct activities like events, like publications, like taking positions on matters, and certainly serving the organization or the cause. It can be health related, it can be religious related, it can be science related, it can be really related to any particular topic. One of the most important features of a not-for-profit organization is the distinction between its ability to do good work for its target audience, let's say, versus its political leanings. There are many not-for-profit organizations that have political overtones to them, political aims. But the charitable donation status can be put in jeopardy if you take too many political viewpoints and you become a lobbyist or you become a political activist. That's the one main thing to be watching out for. Another feature of the not-for-profit organization is that it is an organization that can produce a surplus. That means an excess of revenue over costs, what we might call profit in the corporation's world. But that surplus cannot be distributed. There are no shareholders in a not-for-profit organization. There might be members. It might be a membership-based organization. And there will certainly be a board that governs it along with various committees and so on. But nobody can receive the surplus that is generated. The surplus must be reinvested into the organization or distributed to the target audience of that organization. When a not-for-profit winds up and ceases to do business, its surplus must be distributed to another organization, but there's no private benefit that can be obtained from a not-for-profit organization. A not-for-profit organization can be a membership-based organization. For example, many of the hobbies and clubs that you'd be familiar with, I'm a ham radio guy, and so we have the Amateur Radio Association that I'm a member of. I'm a model railroad guy, and so I'm a member of a model railroad club. And there are many, many type clubs, sports, and other clubs that are membership-based. There are charities, and so there are not-for-profit organizations whose sole purpose is to raise funds for a certain charity, all the medical situations, all of the causes that you'd be familiar with. There are not-for-profit organizations that run programs. So there might be an educational or training not-for-profit whose sole purpose is to generate programs and teachings and courses and perhaps books and literature and online courses and that sort of a thing. The general purpose of a not-for-profit organization is service to others or for a social good. I'd characterize it that way. It's not to make money and to create wealth, although it seems to create wealth in one sense by producing activities that produce revenue and then in turn produce funds that can be used for the service of members or the social good. Governance structure is extremely familiar to you. You would see it. You'd have a board of directors. You would have a chair, a vice chair, various officers and directors. You would have staff. You'd have volunteers. And so the organization, not-for-profit body, is very familiar to us. It has obligations to file. It has to continue. And so that means that annually it would have to pay a fee and file with the appropriate jurisdiction, usually a state or a province, or sometimes a federal national government. But the idea of an annual filing, many of them have to fulfill tax returns, even though the income may not be taxed, but there still is an obligation to file information that proves that it's a not-for-profit that doesn't generate profit and doesn't distribute its surplus. There might be various revenue sources for a not-for-profit organization. I'm going to list a few just for your consideration. One would be membership fees. The hobby groups that I mentioned that I belong to charge an annual membership fee, and that's legitimately charged to the members who are obligated to pay it, or else they forfeit their membership. And these fees are then used to carry out the good works of the organization. There might be grants. And so a not-for-profit might receive grants. It could apply to other foundations and other not-for-profit organizations, or to the private sector, or to the various business and social good organizations out there that produce grants and provide funds in the form of grants. A not-for-profit corporation can receive donations. And so they can, put out requests for funding. They can issue tax receipts if they've been granted that privilege, and therefore they can receive donations, and they can use those donations in accordance with the mission of the organization. There might be savings that accrue to the not-for-profit from its own investments. Not-for-profit should not generally be creating a large surplus, but a reasonable surplus is considered okay, because they need a couple of years, perhaps 2, 3, 4, or 5 years of operating expenses saved up. So therefore, there might be interest earnings, or there might be investments in certain types of securities. And that is done to create a diversity of income sources as well as savings. There might be sales of services and products, and not-for-profit can actually sell items like gifts or books or any typical kind of product or service. There could be consulting sales. There could be services sold if they perform public works and good works. People will maybe be charged a consulting fee and that sort of a thing. So the revenue could also come from events. And many not-for-profits that you'd be familiar with are typically those that produce maybe an annual gala or a fundraising event, or the fantasy auctions, the silent auctions, concerts, the speaking events, that sort of thing. The actual focus of a not-for-profit, when you think about it, is very wide. It's very possible to be engaged in a wide range of activities, generally, though, for either what I would call the common good or a common purpose, like the hobby groups that, again, if we talk about model railroad people or ham radio people or sports car club people, it's the membership base typically has a common interest, and so they organize themselves around their not-for-profit. They receive funds, they get grants, they may charge membership fees, they may sell services or products, and in the end, the whole point is to do something for the common good of that organization, or for the common weal, as they say, the public good, the social. The question about insurance comes up as well. When you're staff member or you're a board of directors member of a not-for-profit organization, you will also be cautious about entering into your work with good due diligence, but you might be subject to lawsuits or other, predatory behaviors out there. And so what we call D&O, insurance directors and officers, is pretty well considered standard requirement in most not-for-profits. So when you think about it, a not-for-profit organization is very similar to many of the other corporate structures we've talked about, but its main focus then is on itself, its members, or its target audience, or people who have like-minded considerations or who want to achieve a certain kind of social good or a certain kind of good activity. And so the broad range of work that a not-for-profit does, all the way from science to teaching to education to religious and spiritual to good works to bricks and mortar to health and wellness types of initiatives. It's a powerful organization, and it has been developed over the last decades to produce good results under good management conditions. So there you have a little summary of the not-for-profit organization. It seems it would be familiar to you, and it's something that we want to support in the Catholic CEO. We encounter quite a lot of not-for-profit organizations that also need help in leadership and in governance. It's Henry Katarna, the Catholic CEO. Thanks again for joining us for this Catholic Business Wisdom series, and we'll see you next time.